You really can't unilaterally rewrite an international agreement. I mean, we just don't do that. First of all, I think that it risks the Good Friday Agreement, the peace settlement in Northern Ireland, if you end up having to impose some sort of hard border. Second, I think it blows the chance of a UK EU free trade deal. I think the EU negotiator, Michel Barnier, has already made that clear, and the Irish government has made it clear. Third, I think it potentially also puts a UK-US free trade deal at risk. If you remember, Nancy Pelosi, who is the majority leader, the Democrats own the House of Representatives at the moment, she came across to London about 18 months ago and said, if there were an outcome on Brexit with which the Irish government wasn't happy, particularly one that put the Good Friday Agreement at risk, we Democrats would block a free trade deal in the House of Representatives, which they can do. They have the majority at the moment. Now, obviously, they could lose it in the November election, but not many observers think that's likely. So you could have a free trade deal, could even be negotiated by a Republican president and get blocked in the House of Representatives. So I think it puts that at risk as well.
So was Jonathan Jones right to resign? Did he have no choice?
I wasn't surprised to see a government lawyer resign, because we stick by international agreements. It's one of the things that we stand for. And by the way, we are criticising very strongly the Chinese government for, we believe, breaching the agreement on Hong Kong, the future of Hong Kong. So the idea that you could unilaterally rewrite your, part of the agreement is just unacceptable. It's a breach of international law.
Theresa May has said, can we be trusted to stand by our legal obligations? What will our international partners think of that? Your sense?
I think she makes a good point. I think she is right.
So what happens to us?
Well, we'll see whether the government is actually intending to do this, because we've not seen the legislation yet.
The whole book begins with the moment that you realise your private cables, your comments had been leaked. What was that like? Take us inside your head at that moment.
The main thing that they had was this letter from 2017, which I'd written 6 months into the Trump presidency, when, to be frank, things were not going very smoothly for them. It was designed as a text saying what was going on for a very senior meeting of ministers, and I knew then, when I saw the kind of comments in it, that this was going to be very bad. And so that's when I thought, I'm in deep trouble here. Trump had said on the White House lawn when he landed from New Jersey that he's not doing a good job for his country, we don't much like this guy. And then he had tweeted, I think on the Tuesday morning, that they weren't going to deal with me anymore. And that was what I had feared, thought might happen. And basically, once if that happens, then you can't really do your job.
Jeremy Hunt volunteered his support for you. Boris Johnson, in your own words, failed to do so. He ducked and weaved and argued it wasn't something to be debated in public. Did that surprise you?
One of my team, he actually showed me the clip on his mobile phone. Then someone showed me the London newspaper headlines. I think the Times headline was something like, "Pressure mounts on beleaguered diplomat." This is why I say that Boris Johnson's handling of that question in the hustings was one of, but only one of the reasons why I decided a few hours later to resign. What I was thinking at the time was, A, can you do the job, or is it now impossible to do the job? B, where do British interests lie on all this? I mean, with Brexit happening and with a UK-US trade deal crucial in the post-Brexit world, you're the person really to be in Washington then. And then, in the light of what Boris Johnson has said, shouldn't you just resign and close it down? That's what I decided at about, I don't know, probably about 9 o'clock that evening to do.
When you saw that clip, did it surprise you? what his response had been?
Look, it would have been nice, obviously, if he had said the same thing as Jeremy Hunt. But, to be fair to him, I think he was probably just trying to keep his options open. And the fact is that Prime Minister has the right to decide who he has as ambassador in Washington.
What were your first impressions of Donald Trump face to face?
He's physically a big man, and I'm 6'3", and he's about the same height. He has genuine presence. If he's in a room which is full of his supporters, he is really good at making eye contact with everyone he's talking to, at giving everyone the impression that he has some time for them, at keeping the tone light, he's got star quality. He works a room very well. So he was impressive in doing that. Obviously, he responds pretty sharply to criticism, and some would say he looks a bit thin-skinned the way he responds. He doesn't need to all the time. But when he's surrounded by people who want to meet him and who are his supporters, then he's in his element.
Let me take you to the night of the election, 2016, November, and you were trying to sum up what was happening in a cable to London, and you wrote, "Fear and loathing was stalking the Washington corridors." Now, it was sent at 2 a.m. I wonder if you feel that went too far.
Look, I'd just been Washington is an extremely democratic city. 93% of Washingtonians who voted for Hillary Clinton. So it was quite hard to find any jubilation on the streets and in the parties around Washington as the election results started coming through. So that was trying to capture the mood of the town that evening. Was it my cleverest ever phrase when it was 2 o'clock in the morning? Maybe not.
During that transition, and we're now around a week later, November the 12th, you write, "The mood in Whitehall deteriorated further when from nowhere a photo of the year," your words, appeared. Nigel Farage in the gold lifts of Trump Tower with Trump. Now, when you say the mood in Whitehall, could Whitehall's mood really be summed up that uniformly?
I was trying to capture that extraordinary image, and I wasn't the only one to say it was the photograph of the year or the photograph of the decade. And remember that we just had that vote, a few months earlier, but British people voted for Brexit, and then you had Donald Trump overturning all the predictions and winning the US election. And then you have, as the first Brit that he sees, not the Prime Minister, but Nigel Farage. It was pretty extraordinary. So, okay, it's a broad, sweeping statement, but I think it was inaccurate.
And you say that Boris Johnson seemed fascinated by Trump. And now you say he's intrigued by his success, his use of language, limited vocabulary, intermittent relationship with facts and truth. Did Boris Johnson begin to model himself on Donald Trump?
I wasn't surprised that Boris was fascinated by Donald Trump because he's a fascinating individual. And if you go back to the Prime Minister's sayings back in 2018, he said, and this was picked up at the time at a private sort of gathering once, that if Donald Trump was negotiating Brexit, he would create chaos right at the start of the negotiations, and all sorts of people would be outraged by what he was saying and demanding, and there'd be huge rows, and then he might get a very good outcome, and we should think about that. That was when he was becoming increasingly dissatisfied with the then track of the Brexit negotiations. And now, as I watch him and the government conduct the post-withdrawal future relationships. I just wonder if there's an aspect of the way Donald Trump would have done it and how he is doing it.
You worked in Brussels, and as such, you describe often being painted as a Europhile. Do you accept now that many in the civil service probably were of one stripe, that there was a kind of groupthink?
I don't really. I think that, and I've read that if you were to have conducted a poll amongst that table of permanent secretaries that when I was National Security Advisor used to sit around, most of them might have voted Remain. But I also think that civil servants, they will give advice, independent advice, and they will tell you the way, as a minister, they think you should go about something. But when the people have decided and have chosen, then they will do what the government of the day feels it needs to do. So I think the civil service did the best it could on Brexit.
In your own words, you say the government seems to be wanting to create a political civil service by coercion, not legislation. A government which surrounds itself with courtiers and enablers and which banishes challenge is set on a troubling course. Do you believe this is a government now who doesn't want people around who disagree?
We'll see how the next generation works out. I think that is possible. I think that may be what we see. I hope it isn't. But I wrote those words because that's what I fear. I don't myself think it would be an improvement. But if that's what the government wants, then that's that should be out there as a proposition, and it should be debated publicly and in Parliament and all the rest of it.
Let's finish by just getting back to the leak itself. You question whether it might have been a hack of a malign outside force. Did you ever think it was Russian interference?
I didn't. One or two friends of mine think it might have been.
The delayed Russia report has now finally been released, and it says the UK badly underestimated the Russia threat. Why do you think there was so little curiosity or appetite to find out more?
I would, if I were still National Security Advisor, I would want a proper investigation and analysis done of what the Russians got up to in some granular detail, so that we are better prepared in the future for to stop it and to address it and to take whatever measures.
Why do you think we didn't do that then?
I don't know. Prime Minister and the government seem very keen to move on and to rule that out. I don't know why, because I think we need that detail. It is clear. There is evidence already that they are still doing stuff in these 2020 American elections. It's what they do. So why wouldn't you want to find out as much as possible about how they're doing it and think about what you can do in the future to stop it?
You write very phlegmatically in your book, but at the end you say you'd like to meet the leaker in a prison cell. If you had that moment, what would you say to them?
I would say, why did you do it? Just motivation fascinates me. What was behind it? Why did you do it? And what did you think the consequences would be? Did you think it would mean I had to resign? Or did you think it would blow over in a weekend?
Do you think they won?
Well, I've been replaced by another diplomat. So if the motive was to get a political appointee in or whatever, then that didn't work.
Lord Darroch, thank you.
Thank you.